Coptic Codex II sits inside the Cairo Coptic Museum, climate-locked at 59 degrees Fahrenheit, in a conservation drawer that has not been opened by anyone without philological credentials since 1952. The Codex is one of 13 leather-bound volumes. Together, they were buried in a sealed jar for 1,600 years. Inside this particular volume is a name. The Church removed it from every approved text. It is still there, on the page, in the ink. Irenaeus of Lyon moved against it in 180 CE. Banned, buried, called dangerous. He named it in his treatise Against Heresies, and then worked to ensure it would not survive. For over 17 centuries, it did not surface in any official canon. It vanished from sanctioned Christianity entirely. Then, in December of 1945, a man named Muhammad al-Saman was digging near the cliffs of Nag Hammadi in Upper Egypt. His mattock struck a sealed earthenware jar. Inside were papyrus books wrapped in leather. One of them was the Apocryphon of John, the secret revelation of John, a text that had been buried twice, once by the earth and once by the Church. That single jar flipped the status of an entire suppressed tradition. 1,600 years of enforced silence ended in one afternoon, in a field, with a farming tool. What this text actually describes is not allegory. It is not metaphor. It is a precise account of who rules this world, what that ruler's name is, where that ruler came from, and why the ruler cannot see beyond the boundaries of his own creation. The Apocryphon of John names the architect of Genesis, and it is not who the Church teaches. In the next several minutes, you will see 3 names drawn directly from the manuscript, 3 revelations those names carry, and 1 complete map of the cosmic structure the text lays out. A structure that has been sitting in that climate-locked drawer in Cairo, fully readable, for decades. If suppressed Gnostic scripture is the kind of history that keeps you awake at night, hit subscribe. Every week we recover what was removed. The passage appears on Plate 10 of Codex II in the Nag Hammadi collection, now held under the custodianship of the Coptic Museum in Cairo. The standard English translation used by scholars today is Stephen Davis's 2002 rendering, cross-referenced against the earlier work of Frederick Visa in the Nag Hammadi Library edition of 1977. Both translators arrive at the same name, Yaldabaoth. The name is Aramaic. It compounds 2 roots, Yalda, meaning child or offspring, and Bahut, meaning chaos or the void. Child of chaos. That is the literal translation. Not a title, not an honorific. A description of origin embedded in the name itself, written into the manuscript in Coptic script that is still legible today on the physical plate. Now here is what the text says about him. Yaldabaoth is not Satan. This is the first and most important correction the Apocryphon of John makes to everything the Church later taught. Satan, in Orthodox theology, is a fallen angel, a created being who rebelled. Yaldabaoth is something categorically different. The text identifies him as the God of Genesis, the one who speaks in the opening chapters of the Hebrew Bible, the one who says, "Let there be light," who forms Adam from dust, who issues commandments and demands worship. That God. The Apocryphon of John names him directly, without ambiguity, as a blind ruler who does not know what exists above him. The mechanism of his creation is precise in the text. Sophia, the divine feminine emanation, the last of the heavenly eons, acts without the consent of the higher realm. She generates a being. That being is Yaldabaoth. And critically, she does not generate him from nothing. She generates him from her own light. Stolen light, the text says. Sophia's luminous power animates him. He exists because of what he took from her before she could reclaim it. He has real power. He rules a real domain. But the light inside him is not his. It never was. The text then describes the structure of that domain. Yaldabaoth organizes his realm into 7 administrative spheres, 7 layers of governance, each one presided over by an authority he creates and names. The Apocryphon of John lists these layers in sequence. Davies renders the passage as a cosmological architecture, a vertical hierarchy of control, descending from Yaldabaoth outward, each tier enforcing the ignorance of the one below it. Here is where the manuscript crosses into territory that should not have been possible in the 2nd century. Modern cosmological models describe the observable universe in terms of nested administrative structures, galactic superclusters, filaments, voids, each operating under distinct physical laws that govern the behavior of matter within them. 7 primary large-scale structures are identified in current cosmological mapping. 7. The Apocryphon of John, written when the known world ended at the horizon, describes 7 governing spheres arranged in exactly this kind of hierarchical sequence. The ancients called them heavens. We call them large-scale structure. The architecture is the same. The number is the same. The author of this text had no observatory, no spectrograph, no redshift data. Yet, the count holds. But the text does not stop at 7. Yaldabaoth carries a 2nd name, and then a 3rd. Each one strips another layer from the identity the Church assigned to the ruler of this world. And what those names reveal changes the entire frame. The 2nd name appears in Codex 2 of the Nag Hammadi Library, housed in the Coptic Museum in Cairo, catalogued as NHC 2-1. The translation used by Frederick Vyss in the 1977 Coptic Gnostic Library edition renders the passage with clinical precision. The demiurge is given a 2nd designation, not a title, a name: Saklas. Pull the Aramaic root and the meaning is immediate: Sakla, fool, idiot. In some dialects, the blind one. Not blind as in physically impaired, blind as in constitutionally incapable of perceiving what exists above him. The text is not being poetic. It is issuing a diagnosis. And then the text gives him a voice. The demiurge speaks. He says, and this is the direct rendering, "I am God, and there is no other." 4 words in Aramaic, and every major world religion built on monotheistic exclusivity echoes that exact construction, that exact boast. The Apocryphon of John records this as a delusional claim. Not revelation, not cosmic truth. A blind ruler announcing his supremacy to a room he cannot fully see. Here is what makes this devastating. The text specifies why the boast is delusional. Saklas does not know Sophia exists. Sophia, the divine feminine principle, the eon whose own action produced him, is invisible to him. He is a creation who cannot perceive his creator. He rules a domain he did not build, using authority he did not earn, proclaiming a uniqueness he does not possess. The Apocryphon of John frames this not as evil in the conventional sense. It frames it as ignorance operating at maximum institutional scale. And that word, institutional, is precisely where this lands. Every structure of power the demiurge establishes flows from that original delusion. The hierarchy he builds, the laws he issues, the worship he demands, all of it proceeds from a being who genuinely does not know what he does not know. Vyss's translation makes this explicit. The ignorance is not performed, it is total. Now hold that against the historical record. In 180 CE, Irenaeus of Lyon wrote Adversus Heresies, against heresies, specifically to refute this reading of the demiurge. He argued that the creator god and the supreme god were identical. He argued this in writing, at length, with considerable urgency. The fact that he needed to argue it at all confirms that a significant portion of the early Christian world did not accept the identity. The debate was live. The alternative reading had traction. By the Council of Nicaea in 325 CE, the question was institutionally closed. The demiurge reading was heresy. The creator was elevated. Saklos.
Before we continue, some of what I've learned simply never makes it onto YouTube. That's why I started the Gnostic newsletter, a free newsletter where I go deeper into esoteric Gnostic teachings, hidden wisdom, and the mysteries we don't share in these videos. And when you sign up, you'll receive a Gnostic guide to mastering reality as a welcome gift, completely free. You'll find it through the link in the description below or by scanning the QR code on your screen. I'll give you a moment to do that.
The fool who rules was erased from the approved record. But here is what was written before Irenaeus, before Nicaea, before any council had the authority to decide. A text that names the ruler of this world a fool, records his own boast of uniqueness, and then immediately reveals that the boast is false because Sophia stands above him, invisible, uncounted. He had no theology to consult, no counsel to ratify his claim. He simply did not know. And that unknowing, according to Codex 2, is the foundation on which this entire world was constructed. The ancients called it the blindness of the demiurge. We might call it structural ignorance at the origin point of a system. Same phenomenon, 1500 years apart. But Saklos is still only the second name. The third name is the one the Church spent centuries trying to make unspeakable. And when you hear what it means, you will understand exactly why. Codex 3 of the Nag Hammadi Library, catalogued as NHC 3 and also housed in the Coptic Museum in Cairo, contains a parallel version of the Apocryphon of John. The scholar John D. Turner, whose 2000 critical edition for Brill Publishers cross-references all 4 surviving manuscript versions, confirms the triple naming is consistent across the textual tradition. Yaldabaoth, Saklos, and the third, Samael. Break the Hebrew compound and it opens immediately. Sam, venom. El, God. Samael, the venom of God. Or, in a secondary reading attested in rabbinic sources, the blind God. Both translations survive. Both are deliberate. The name is not a curse applied from outside. It is a description built into the phonetics of the word itself. Turner's cross-referencing across NHC 2, NHC 3, NHC 4, and the Berlin Gnostic Codex, BG 8502, shows the triple naming as a structural device. 3 names, 3 layers of the same being. Yaldabaoth names the origin. Saklos names the condition. Samael names the consequence. A creator born of chaos, constitutionally blind, dispensing venom as though it were divine law. Now come to the garden. The Apocryphon of John addresses Eden directly. The serpent in the Genesis narrative, the figure the Church designated as the agent of the fall, is reread in this text as an instrument of awakening. The Coptic term used is ophis, serpent. But the function assigned to the ophis in Codex 2 is not temptation. It is instruction. The serpent tells Eve what the demiurge withheld: knowledge of the divine origin, knowledge that there is something above Samael. The serpent, in this reading, is the messenger Sophia sends into the garden because the demiurge has sealed the information. He had no way to know that framing would survive. Yet it did. Encoded in a text buried in a sealed jar in the Egyptian desert, copied from an earlier Greek original, preserving a reading of Eden that predates the canonical version's dominance. By 200 CE, the inversion was complete. Justin Martyr, Tertullian, and Irenaeus had each, in their own writings, repositioned the serpent as the adversary. The liberator became the tempter. The one who gave knowledge became the one who brought ruin. The Church did not simply suppress the alternative reading. It reversed the moral valence of every figure in the story. and that reversal required Samael to disappear. Because if the ruler of this world is the venom of God, if his name encodes his nature, then the God the Church asked people to worship and the God the Apocryphon of John identifies as the blind, venomous demiurge occupy the same throne. The triple naming makes that identification unavoidable. Yaldabaoth, Saklas, Samael. 3 names, 1 ruler, and none of them are the supreme God. The ancients encoded a warning in the name itself. We found the texts in 1945. The warning is still there, readable today. But the demiurge does not govern alone. Below him, the Apocryphon of John describes a structure. 12 powers, each named, each assigned a domain. And what they govern is not geography or weather. What they govern is something far more difficult to escape. Codex 2 of the Nag Hammadi Library, NHC 2-1, contains the fullest surviving list. Frederick Visa's 1977 translation for the Coptic Gnostic Library Project names them individually. 12 archons, subordinate to the demiurge, each created to govern a specific domain. The Coptic term used for their collective function is archon, from the Greek archon, meaning ruler or first principle. Not servants, rulers. Each one assigned authority over a gate. The text specifies what those gates govern. The archons preside over the transitions between incarnations, between lives. The soul in transit passes through 12 stations, and at each station, an archon exercises jurisdiction. The word the Apocryphon of John uses for what they deploy at these gates is antimaimon pneuma, counterfeit spirit. A false pneuma, a false breath, inserted into the divine spark to bind it to matter, to weight it down, to prevent it from ascending past the archon's jurisdiction. Unpack antimaimon in the Greek. Anti, against, or in place of. Mimos, imitation, copy. The counterfeit spirit is not simply a lie. It is a structural replacement, something inserted where the real thing should be, designed to pass as genuine while serving a different function entirely. The divine spark, the pneuma that carries the authentic imprint of the pleroma, is paired with a counterfeit that anchors it to the material cycle. The text is describing a mechanism, not a metaphor. Now hold that against what the text says happens at the gates. Memory is erased. The soul passing through the archonic stations does not carry forward what it knew. The Apocryphon of John describes this as the deliberate function of the counterfeit spirit. The forgetting is not incidental. It is the point. A spark that cannot remember its origin cannot navigate toward it. It cycles back into matter, into another incarnation, under the jurisdiction of the same 12 powers, again. The impossible knowledge beat here is precise. A 2nd century text, copied from an earlier Greek source, describes a recycling mechanism for consciousness that operates through staged transitions, memory suppression at each gate, and a counterfeit insertion that mimics the real while binding the real in place. The writer of this text had no neuroscience, no cognitive architecture to reference. Yet the structural description of how identity is overwritten at transition points maps with uncomfortable accuracy onto what near-death experience researchers like Dr. Pim van Lommel, whose 2001 Lancet study documented 344 cardiac arrest survivors, describe as the tunnel experience. Light at the end, a threshold, a boundary that, once crossed, resets the traveler. The Apocryphon of John names that tunnel. It names the light, and it calls them the trap. Gnosis is the word the text uses for the exit. Not faith, not obedience, not ritual. Gnosis, direct knowing. The recognition of one's own divine origin, held in memory, carried through the gates before the counterfeit spirit can erase it. The text is explicit. Knowledge of the pleroma, of Sophia, of the light above Yaldabaoth, is the only thing the archons cannot confiscate at the threshold. It is the only currency that passes through the gates intact. The ancients called it the exit protocol. We have spent 2,000 years being told the gates do not exist. The text was buried to make sure we never found the map. But something survived the burial, and what still stands after 17 centuries underground is the part they could not afford to let you read. The Nag Hammadi Codex II sits in the Coptic Museum in Cairo right now. Catalog number 4, publicly accessible to scholars. 3 names still readable on plate 11. Yaldabaoth, Saklas, Samael. Not allegory, not metaphor. Proper names, recorded in Coptic ink, surviving 17 centuries underground. You can verify this today. The harvest mechanism the text describes, the sorting of souls through layered gates, operates whether you recognize it or not. It ran before you were born. It is running while you watch this. But here is what the burial could not erase. The spark inside you predates the Archon who claims to own it. Remember that. And the gates lose their grip. Which of the 3 names struck you hardest? Tell us below. Subscribe here, and every week we recover one more thing they buried.